So today's problems, we're going to be looking at multiplying our positive numbers. Okay, so we need to evaluate each expression. So these first few, we're really looking at those positive and negatives because by now we should be able to multiply these fractions because we simply have the math Macarena. So in order to multiply our fractions, we know that we want to have a top and a bottom for each. First we will divide. We're not doing any division here, so we just multiply and we keep the top with the top and the bottom with the bottom. It's 12 over 3. Lastly, we reduce, which gives us 4. That's a terrible looking 4. That's much better. Okay, now the next thing I need to do is count my number of negatives. I only have one negative. It's an odd number, so therefore my answer is negative. Now this next one here, we literally have the same numbers, it's just that what's negative and positive has changed. So I already know that the answer here is going to be 4 because as you can see it's exactly the same numbers, but now we've got 2 negatives. So 2 negatives, 1, 2, is it's an even number, so it means our final answer is going to be positive. Or you could simply have left it as 4. Either way, still correct. And our next problem, again, keep the top with the top and the bottom with the bottom. So that's going to give us 12 times 5, top with the top, and bottom with the bottom is 1 times 4. 12 times 5 is 60, divided by or over 4. So then I have to ask myself, lastly we reduce. How many times is 4 going to 60? The answer is, of course, 15 times. I need to count my number of negatives. There's only 1 there, so therefore my answer is negative. And hopefully you should see what's coming next here, because again we have the same exact numerical digits, it's just that their signs are different. So we know that this is going to equal 15, and I can see that there's 1, 2 negatives, so therefore my answer is positive. Next, we're going to evaluate each expression again. Very simple numbers that we're dealing with here. Again, we are looking at the positives and negatives, what happens when they interact. So, I know that I would go in order. 1 times 2, I know is 2. I'm simply going to keep multiplying. Times 3 gives me 6. I then count. I've only got 1 negative, so therefore my answer is negative 6. Now we can move right on to this next one. We already know that the answer is 6. I've got 1, 2 negatives. That's an even number of negatives. My answer is positive 6. For the next one, it's still 6. I need to count my number of negatives. I've got 1, 2, 3 negatives. That is an odd number, so my answer is negative. Order each set of numbers from least to greatest. Okay, so I know that I've mentioned this before. The easiest way to make sure that I get numbers in order from least to greatest is to put them more or less in their correct spots on a number line. So I'm going to put my 0 there because I know that my positive numbers are to the right of 0 and my negative numbers are to the left. I've got 1, 2, oh look at that, 0's already on here. I was going to start with 0 in the middle anyway, but this one counts. And then I've got 4 and 8. Well, I know that 4 would come on my number line before 8. And then I've got negative 2 and negative 6. So when I'm going this way, negative 2 is closer because it's 2 units away from 0 than negative 6 is. Now remember, I didn't put all the little lines there because I'm really more interested in their placements on the number line. So if I'm going to put these in order from left to right, or from least to greatest, it would be negative 6, negative 2, 0, 4, 8. Now this one looks a little bit trickier. There's lots of 5s, lots of 2s here. So we need to make sure we can differentiate between them. So I get my number line. And I notice right away that this one's very different because there's only one positive number. And I know that positive number, of course, is going to be the furthest to the right, greater than 0. So I'm going to go ahead and put my 0 right here. Now this time 0 doesn't count like it did here. In that first one, it was actually part of the original problem, but it isn't in this one. But it provides a good placeholder because I know that my negative numbers need to be on the left side of 0, and the ones that have the smaller absolute values, meaning their distance from 0, should be closer to that 0. Now, I should know that negative 5 halves really is the same as, if I reduce that, 2 goes into 5 twice, so it would be negative 2 and 1 half. So if I look at these, all of my other negative numbers, all of them begin with, the other 3 all begin with 5. So I think it's safe to say that the very first number that's closest to 0 from the negative side is going to be negative 5 halves. Now, some of you might have been inclined to use the negative 2 and 1 half there, but that wouldn't be correct because I need to always revert back to my original. Well, I shouldn't say it wouldn't be correct, but you need to then transfer it back to the original. So you might as well put it in on the number line using that. Now, next thing I have to look at, so I've done this one and this one. I want to cross them off to make my sort very, very clear. So I've got these 3 numbers. I've got negative 5, negative 5 and 2/10, and then negative 5 and 1 half. Well, 2 of those are further away from 5 than, from 0. So therefore my next number on here should be my negative 5. So the last thing I need to contend with are these last 2. So this one is 5 1/2, right there. This was 5 2/10. So what I need to figure out is which one is further away from the 5. And of course, I'm still, remember, going in the direction of the left. Okay? So 2/10, negative 5 and 2/10. I'm going to change that into a fraction momentarily. And negative 5 and 1 half. Well, hopefully you recognize that 5 and 1 half, I can change that so that they're both tenths. Be negative 5, and if this is some number over 10, 2 times 10 is 5, 5 times 1 is 5. So which one is further away? Well, it would be the 5/10, negative 5 and 5/10. So that means the next one would be negative 5.2. Remember, transfer it back, and negative 5 and 1 half. Okay, I've taken up a lot of room here. I need to actually get my answer on here. So let's see, from left to right, the first one is here, is negative 5 and 1 half. Then negative 5.2. Then negative 5. Negative 5 halves. And then 5.5, or 5 and 1 half, or 5 and 5/10. Just want to clean that up. Got a little bit crazy here. Oh, that's much better. Far more legible so that you can read it later. There we go. Next. Okay, so they give us 30 plus negative 30 equals 0. That's like our example. Okay. Right, another sum, that means addition, of 2 numbers that equal 0. Well, I know anything that's going to equal 0, if there's 2 numbers, it has to be the opposites. So whatever I choose, they have to be opposites. So in other words, I could have, say, negative 2 plus 2. That would equal 0. Or negative 10 plus 10. That would equal 0. Or negative 20.3 plus 20.3. 3. That would equal 0. So again, just always the opposites. Your answers are likely different than mine, but the point here is that they have to be opposites. The next, I need to write the sum of 3 numbers that equals 0. Sum 3 numbers equals 0. Well, I could do a couple of things here. I'll give you an example. If I wanted to change that into 3 numbers, I would use negative 2 plus 1 plus 1, because you see how there's 1 plus 1 equals 2? That would equal 0. I go over here to this 10. I could break down my negative 10 to negative 6 plus negative 4 plus 10 equals 0. Right here gives me my negative 10. So I'm ultimately getting to those, I'm getting to the point where they are opposites, but they're not. So the sum of 4 numbers equals 0. None of them are opposites. So that would probably be very similar to what I did here, because none of those are opposites. So I'm actually just going to extend that, and again, very likely you won't have the same answer as me, and that's fine, provided that we end up with opposites. So I'm going to leave this negative 6 plus negative 4, because I know that that's going to give me 10. And then plus, well, I need 2 more different numbers that equal 10. So I'm going to say use 7 plus 3. Because I know that equals 0, because if you're thinking about that, that equals 10, and this equals negative 10. And those, of course, are my opposites. You don't have to show that, because here's your answer. And again, your answers are going to be different than mine. If you're really unsure if yours are correct, come and ask me. Next one. A submarine is searching for underwater features. It is accompanied by a small aircraft and an underwater robotic vehicle. That sounds exciting. At one time, the aircraft is 200 meters above the surface, and the submarine is 55 meters below the surface. The underwater robotic vehicle is 227 meters below the surface. So my robotic vehicle is 227 below the surface. The submarine is 55 meters below. That's important. And the aircraft is 200 meters above. So if I were going to draw this, and again, just kind of sketch it out, I've got something up here at 200 meters above. Then I've got something at, say, like here. That's negative 55, because that's below, right? And then I've got something down here that's negative 227, also below. What is the difference in height between the submarine and the aircraft? The difference in height between the submarine and the aircraft. So this is my submarine, and this is my aircraft, and I want to know the difference between them. So difference means I subtract, so I'm going to take the height of the aircraft. I'm going to subtract the submarine, which is negative 55. And I get 2. You ready? Stay, change, change, cha-cha-cha. And of course, when I do that, I now have got a simple addition problem. I do 200 plus 55, gives me 255 meters as my answer. Next, what is the difference, or the distance, between the underwater robotic vehicle and the submarine? So that's still my negative 55, and now my negative 227. So I'm looking for the distance between. So I'm going to take my negative 55, because that's on top. I'm going to subtract my lower number, which is negative 227. And then when I do that, and Okay, let's think about this. I get to stay, change, change, cha-cha-cha. Wait a minute, I forgot a sign here. That's negative. I knew when I was looking at it. So this is, remember, distance. I'm subtracting, that's my minus sign. And this negative is here because that's what it is in actuality. So now I still stay, change, change, cha-cha-cha. And now because the signs are different, find the difference. So I'm going to do 227 minus 55. 7 minus 5 is 2. And then I got 22, take away 5, gives me 17. So my answer, the signs are different, find the difference, which is what I did. I need to look at the number with the larger absolute value, which would be here. So that number is positive, so therefore my answer is 172 meters. Next, Claire is cycling at a speed of 12 miles per hour. If she starts at a position chosen as 0, what will her position be after 45 minutes? Okay, so she's going 12 miles per hour. She's starting at 0. What is her position after 45 minutes? So we just have to be a little careful here because this is in minutes and this is in hours. And we know she went 45 minutes. So what we need to say is 45 minutes is how much of an hour. I know there's 60 minutes in an hour. And if I were to reduce that, I know the largest gazinta they share is 15. So I would think about dividing top and bottom by 15. So 45 divided by 15, of course, is 3. 60 divided by 15 is 4. And you might have already known that because you should know that 45 minutes is 3/4 of an hour. So now we know that Claire is going 12 miles per hour for 3/4 of an hour. So I'm going to simply multiply my 12 times 3/4. I feel like we already did this earlier, but it's fine. Either way, we're going to put this over 1. I'm going to keep the top with the top and the bottom with the bottom. So it's 12 times 3 over 1 times 4. 12 times 3 is 36. 1 times 4 is 4. 36 divided by 4. (36 divided by 4 is, of course, 9. So what is her position after 45 minutes? It is 9 miles. Next, we have Hans cycling at a speed of -8 miles per hour. I know this is weird looking because how can you be going -8 miles per hour? Remember we talked about that if we were comparing east to west. So in this case, Han would be going west, right? He's also starting at the same 0 point. What will his position be after 45 minutes? What would his position be after 45 minutes? So again, we know that's the 3/4, just like it was before, right? So now I've got -8 times 3/4. I am going to put this over 1. So I've got the top with the top and the bottom with the bottom. So I've got -8 times 3 and 1 times 4. -8 times 3 is -24. 1 times 4 is 4. Lastly, I reduce. How many times does 4 go into 24? We should know it's 6. And I only have one negative there, so it's going to remain negative. So it'll be -6 miles. Again, what that really means is that Han is going to the west and not to the east, like Claire is. Then it says, what is the distance between them after 45 minutes? So in other words, what you're being asked here is, if you want to think about this on a number line, if I know that Claire is at 9 miles and Han is at -6, if I put my 0 here, that's where we started. Han is here at, say, -6, and Claire is here at +9. So now we really just need to look at the distance between these two. So how far does it take it from 0 to 6, or -6 to 0? That would be 6 units. And to get from 0 to 9, that would be 9 units. So altogether, that's 6 plus 9. So that equals 6 plus 9. I know, of course, it's 15. And that's 15 miles. Okay, next, fill in the missing numbers in these equations. Well, we're solving equations. We've been doing this for a while. I know in this first one, I've got -7 times some number that I do not know. It's going to give me -14. So what's the opposite of multiplying times -7? That would be dividing by -7 on both sides. These cancel out, so I'm left with that silly question mark instead of a variable, equals -14 divided by -7. Well, I know that a negative divided by a negative, because there's two negatives, of course, will give me a positive. I've got 14 divided by 7. That, of course, is 2. So there's the first one. B, same as before, the opposite of multiplication is division, so I'm going to divide both sides by 3. These cancel, so that means our question mark is going to be equal to -15 divided by 3. There's only one negative sign I see there, so it is going to be negative. Then 15 divided by 3 is 5. Answer to the next one. Moving right along, I know the opposite of times 4 is to divide by 4, both sides. They cancel. I'm left with this mystery number is 36 divided by 4. Excuse me, 32. Sorry, I know I do that sometimes. I get excited. I can't help myself. Anyway, 32 divided by 4 is going to give me 8. Nothing but positives all around, so the answer is positive. And the next one, and the last one in this section, is -49 times 3. Okay, and this, we're looking for the missing number, which in this case is at the end there. So very simply, I need to do this multiplication. I can't do it. No, you can. -40 times 3, of course, is going to be -120, right? And then 9 times 3 is 27. Well, technically negative. So I got -120, basically plus -27 or -27. Well, I've got nothing but negative numbers here. Okay, the signs are the same. Find the sum. So I'm looking for the sum of these two numbers here. -120 plus -27. Well, if I think this through, I know I've got -120 plus 20 would be -140, because I continue to get further into the hole, remember. It's not -20, it's -27. So that, of course, is going to give me -147 as the answer.